Now, UNICEF is working in very close collaboration with the government of Uzbekistan, in particular with the Ministry of Public Education and other development partners to support equitable access to quality education in the country. And the Constitution of Uzbekistan foresees that every child has a right to free secondary education, and since independence, Uzbekistan has done a lot to make sure that almost every child has access to quality education. And what we are particularly glad to see is that in the last couple of years, there has also a greater emphasis not only on access to education, but also on improving the quality of education for every child. Now, UNICEF is the organization that supports governments in making sure that the rights of every child are fulfilled, so that the governments are fulfill their obligations as a state party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And education is a very important right that every child has, because we also believe that for the future of every child, education is very critical, and it provides a pathway to a stronger future and a successful life for every child. And we also believe that every child has a right to education, no matter who the child is, where the child lives, or what socioeconomic background their family has. And that's why we are starting with education from preschool education, and we see that there's also increased emphasis to preschool education in the country. And in middle-income countries like Uzbekistan, our particular emphasis is on strengthening the system, the education system in the country, and that includes policy reviews, that includes capacity development, and that includes also generating the knowledge that is required to make evidence-based policies. So some of the things that we have been doing, for instance, is that we have been working to support the Ministry of Public Education to review law on education in the country, to review inclusive education policies, to review the teacher workforce policy in the country. Last year, we have also been working with the ministry and with all the development partners to develop the second education sector plan for the next 5 years that will guide the development of the education sector in the country. And currently, we are working with the government to revise the curriculum. And it's very important to move from a curriculum that's purely knowledge-based to a competency-based curriculum, and that has been a very important emphasis of our work, to make sure children have both the foundational but also the transactional skills that they need in life. Now, we have also been working with the government, and particularly the ministry, to work on the teacher professional standards and the assessment methodologies for teachers. We have been working together to improve the education management information system, so that this system can provide the data and the evidence that's needed to make better policy, and that collect data and analyze those data, and also to monitor the provision of quality education. And the particular emphasis has been on student learning outcomes. So what we have done recently is the first ever nationwide survey on learning achievements in the country, and that's very important to guide future policy making of the ministry to increase learning achievements of students. And we are currently also undertaking a study to support community-based participation in school administration. Now, one other aspect that we are working on with the ministry is to support the needs of particularly vulnerable children. And unfortunately, in Uzbekistan, it is the case that many vulnerable children still live in residential care institutions, which is something the Ministry of Education is also overseeing. And many of these children in residential care institutions are not actually orphans. They have one or two parents, and they could actually grow up in their families if these families had the right support and assistance that is needed. And that's why we are actually very glad to see that the President last year has put another emphasis on ensuring that there are more community-based services available to families, so that children can grow up in their families and not being sent to residential care institutions. And one thing we have been doing is, which is very critical in this system, to look at the functions of the Guardian and Trusteeship Council, which is under the Ministry of Education, because they need to make the decisions which children are being sent to these types of institutions. One other important thing is that we have been supporting the Ministry of Public Education in implementing the presidential resolution with regard to the situation in closed educational institutions. And we have been assessing the situation of boys and girls in these institutions. There are 4 of them, and right now we have been assessing 300 of these boys and girls to look how they can be reintegrated into their families so that they can grow up also in their families.